Hello and welcome to The Green Room by Deloitte, an award-winning podcast where we explore the topics that matter most in business. I'm George Parrett, and this is episode number 49, where we ask, can one person change a big business?
I mean, it is the reality that there weren't many women in senior positions as I was coming through, and so, I was often the first woman to have a role.
But at no point would it have entered my head that I would be or should be the CEO of the company.
I can't look after my team if I'm not looking after myself.
I think the burden of the magnitude of change that you're expected to deliver rises as you take on increasingly more senior positions.
Thank you so much for tuning into this episode of The Green Room. And just a reminder, you can find all of our episodes on YouTube now, which is great, and you can actually see The Green Room. And I'm delighted to be joined by my good friend and co-host, Ethan Worth. How are you, Ethan?
Yeah, good, thanks, George. Great to have you here with me in the studio today.
Thank you very much. And today we're talking about whether one person can really make a big change, a big impact on their business, positive change, ideally. And I think we need some people in the studio to talk us through this. So who have we got, Ethan?
Yeah, we're joined by two titans of industry. Both will definitely have had huge impacts in their respective fields. So we're joined by Alan Jope. He is the CEO of Unilever. He's been with the company for more than 35 years, working in leadership roles in North America and Asia before being appointed CEO. After 5 years at the top, he's retiring at the end of 2023. Alan, welcome to The Green Room.
Hi, thank you very much for having me, Ethan. Nice to see you, George.
Thanks for joining us. We're also joined by Sharon Thorne. She is the chair of the Deloitte Global Board of Directors. She's also a returning guest to The Green Room, last featuring just before she took on this role. Sharon is also set to retire towards the end of the year. Welcome back, Sharon.
Thank you so much, Ethan and George. Wonderful to be here and great to be with you, Alan.
Likewise.
Sharon, you're very much a friend of the pod. I think that's fair to say. When you were last here, it was quite a while ago. It was the start of your role, and the Green Room has changed quite a lot since then. So welcome back. But as Ethan said, you're both quite big names in business. But just to help our listeners and our viewers, could you perhaps sort of talk a bit about your journey in an X Factor style and how you came to your current roles? Perhaps, Alan, can you go first?
Well, look, I was born and raised in Glasgow, quite sort of modest upbringing. My mum and dad made compromises to get me a decent education, and my sister as well, and I'm very grateful for that. I think it set me off on a decent path. I needed a job after university and was lucky enough to join Unilever, where I've been actually for 38 years. At first, can you believe that? How can someone with these looks have spent 38 years at Unilever? Anyway, spent the first 5 years in London and then the next 27 years outside of the UK, 13 in North America and another 13 in Asia, 4 in Bangkok in Thailand, 5 in Shanghai, China, and 4 in that paradise called Singapore. And then came back here 6 years ago and was appointed chief exec 4.5 years ago. And the important bits are that I'm married to my much better three-quarters, Rosie, and we have 3 grown kids, Amy, who's perfect, and 2 idiot boys.
Well, yeah, it's good to get those names in there. And Sharon, was your journey similarly sort of globe-trotting?
So I'm very, disappointed, really, because no, it wasn't. Although, obviously, I've ended up with a very globe-trotting role, which has been an incredible privilege. But, I have a much more humble sort of trajectory, really. I started in Manchester in audit in Deloitte in 1986. It was, I wasn't sure what I wanted to do. Went through the careers fair and sort of identified that actually accounting, professional services was somewhere that probably played to my skills, and joined Deloitte, as I say, 1986 in audit. Have had an amazing career, amazing opportunities. I did escape for a year, but realised the error of my ways. That was very early on, and came back. I have had great opportunities with clients across industries, but also many leadership roles. And I mean, it is the reality that there weren't many women in senior positions as I was coming through. And so, I was often the first woman to have a role which has, opportunities and challenges. In 2004, I was one of the first women elected to our UK board. I was also made head of our audit practice in the north. In 2006, I was the first female on our executive, became our talent partner. So, I was very much based in Manchester for many, many years. And then I took on a role on the executive to sort of be global and strategy, it was called. And then we started to, we went on a journey to consolidate our firm. Our network is complicated, a number of, different firms and different member firms in different countries. I led that consolidation across a big part of Europe, which was very challenging, but led to the opportunity to become global chair, and I never imagined I would be the global chair. So it's been fantastic. And outside of work, it's a little bit more lively. I am on husband number 3, but he is absolutely the one. Although I tell him he better behave, or husband number 4. So stuff that may come. 3 amazing stepdaughters, 2 dogs.
So it sounds like, if my maths is right, I think it's 37 years and 38 years, you said. So you've both been with your respective industries a huge amount of time, incredibly experienced. Did you ever think when you started all those years ago that you'd ever be where you are now? I guess, Alan, did you ever think you'd be a CEO of a multinational company?
And not only did I not think I would be CEO of a multinational company, it never was an ambition of mine. I have felt very lucky at every stage in my career to have been put in something that I felt I was not quite ready for. And so I think there's 2 reasons why I've stayed with Unilever for 38 years. One is just constantly being stretched and also exploring the world in kind of that tour. And the second is the values of the company. We're kind of a decent company that puts a high premium on treating each other with respect. But at no point would it have entered my head that I would be or should be the CEO of the company. And in fact, I've not made a huge secret of it that when I was invited to participate in the process to select the next CEO, I was very, very hesitant at first because these jobs come, it's not all upside. There's a cost to leading a business at scale, one of which is living your life in constant fear of chairs. And so it's slightly nerve-wracking for me sitting next to a powerful chair and a chairwoman at that. So, it's not all upside being a CEO.
And did you ever think you'd be a global chair, scaring CEOs in the that sit next to you?
I would never, ever have imagined it. And I was the first person in my family to go to university. And in fact, the decision to go to university was not something that my father was entirely supportive of, because I can remember when I was 16 coming home from school and saying, my friends are talking about going to university. I mean, sounds really interesting. And, he said, and this, partly this is his background and upbringing, well, that would be a waste of taxpayers' money because you're going to, at some point get married, have children and give up work.
Yeah.
And some of those things probably drive you on. And, to Alan's point about ending up in a company with incredible values and support and looking to change and helping someone like me, come through into leadership roles, being given great development. And then, so there was never formal sponsorship. And that's one of the things I believe in very strongly is so important, particularly to continue the journey that we're on to improve the number of women in leadership. But I had informal sponsors, and I can look back now and see that they gave me opportunities. And if I hadn't had those opportunities, those opportunities stretch you, develop you, and allow you to take the next role, and so on and so on. And you get, exposure to lots of different experiences and people that give you other opportunities. So I've just been incredibly fortunate to have been given those opportunities, and then, obviously to make the most of them, which is what I encourage other people to do.
Yeah, it's really interesting. You both touched on it. You weren't looking for these leadership roles, but you fell into them. But what I'm curious about is, at what point does the opportunity to make positive change occur? Is it during that journey, or is it when you're sat at that desk and finally have that sort of title by your name?
That's a great question.
Sure.
So and it comes back to my childhood, and my dad was in the Navy. I went to 9 schools. I experienced and saw quite a lot of bullying, but also this traditional sort of because my father was in the Navy, he had very traditional views, and I can remember at the age of 7, sort of him saying, well, girls, are not as strong as boys. Boys can run faster, they can throw further. But the implication was a little bit that boys are better than girls. And I was horrified. It's like, that is not fair. And so equity and fairness became a really big part of everything I was sort of looking to do. And why can't I be as good as a boy? Why can't I do this? Why can't I do that? And then I wanted to make sure that other people had those opportunities. And so it permeates all of the roles. From a very young age at work, you can be making a difference and challenging what's happening in a constructive way. We get better because people who work for us want to make things better. And that's how, I honestly think you have a really critical role that you can play. And, and then as you get into these roles, you clearly can make change on a bigger scale and drive values and set the tone from the top. But if you don't have, it's the whole culture, and it's all the people in that culture. One of the great, things about Deloitte is, we have so many amazing people who have the right values, and obviously we try and recruit the people with the right values, but who do incredible things day in, day out, and create the inclusive culture that we've got.
And Alan, how about you?
Actually, I think I'd give the same answer to your first question and your second question, which is, I profoundly believe that all of us can make an impact in an organization and in the world at any level, in any role. And I've observed this paradox, which is that the people who put their head down and try to deliver absolutely the best they can, whatever assignment they're given, end up being presented with a smorgasbord of opportunities to move on, have impact. And those people who spend just a little bit too much time worrying about, are they getting the credit, what's my next promotion, and who are a bit too focused on the next step rather than the current step, the paradox is they seem to find that they're holding themselves back. So not only can an individual have an impact at every level, a belief system that I can have an impact in whatever assignment I'm given now, I think will create the opportunity and conditions to have an even bigger impact in the future. And I've certainly found that in my own experience.
And when you're presented with that smorgasbord of opportunities, how do you make decisions about what's the right step to take? And are there any pivotal moments in your careers where you really think that decision forged the rest of my path?
I think you might get quite different answers, actually, from Sharon and me. I've been incredibly picky on where I worked and completely sloppy on what I was asked to do. So I've been repeatedly taken fantastic locations and pretty second-rate jobs.
He's still got that.
Well, so, I was running the biggest brand in our business in the UK and was presented with the opportunity to go and run the hand and nail variant of Vaseline intensive care lotion in the United States. And my wife and I fancied living in the States, went over, threw myself into that, and 6 months later was presented with a much better opportunity in the US. Exact same thing when I went to live in Thailand. China was a notorious departure room for people in Unilever. The previous 6 leaders of Unilever China got sacked at the end of the assignment, and I was asked, would you like to go run Unilever's business in China? So you can imagine, I did first ask, are you trying to tell me something? And the motivation was that we were living in Fairfield County, Connecticut, which is like Beverly Hills but with money, and our kids were getting spoiled. And so Rosie and I felt it would be really good for the kids to get them out of that privileged bubble in Connecticut, and that was the primary motivator to go live in China. And then, threw myself into the role. I think timing is often an important consideration. I happened to arrive in China during a period of tremendous opening up and growth, and the business did very well. And actually, the postscript is we took our kids out of this privileged bubble in the US and ended up putting them in a very privileged bubble in Shanghai. So that didn't really work very well, but we had a good time anyway. So yeah, I think you make the most of it.
And you did get sacked, so
Didn't get sacked at the end of this hour.
Well, I suppose just, taking overall, you get given certain opportunities, and I don't know, because it wasn't all the geography, although I did try and go overseas in the early 90s, interestingly, but it was just when there was a global recession. I was supposed to be going to Sydney and it got cancelled. Then I was supposed to be going to Paris, it got cancelled. And I was offered Tulsa in Oklahoma. And I just thought, it's not Sydney or Paris. And so I actually stayed in the UK, but I actually went into it.
Although to the lovely people of Tulsa, it's so in charge.
I know. But the other thing was in the US, because they're very strict, they don't give you many holidays, or they were much less then. And I just thought, part of this is to travel the world and really see places. And I wasn't sure I'd get that opportunity. So I went into our financial advisory practice, and then that actually led me to leaving the firm for a year. So this is back in 93. I left for a year. And because I was on secondment to a client, and they offered me the finance director's job. It was a small subsidiary of a big listed company. And they offered me a BMW and quite a lot more pay. And obviously those things weren't important, but I did take the job. But that was this was a big decision to leave. And, one of the reasons I'd left was I thought Deloitte was working me too hard. I was, it's just... And then I realised I got into industry, and actually it was me. I have an incredible work ethic because I want to do my best. And then I thought, oh, yeah, no, it's not Deloitte. And actually then I started to realise all of the things that were amazing about Deloitte, the incredible people, the variety, the challenge, the values. And I just thought, and then just by chance, I met the head of the Manchester office at Manchester Airport. And he went back to the office and told everyone, right, we've got to get her back. And that was amazing because I was ready to come back, but I played hard to get. So I got a promotion and all of those sorts of things. So that was quite good. So that was a pivotal moment because I came back into Deloitte and to the structure, and with people saying, you're on a partner track, we'd like you to come through to partner.
Would you have come back if you hadn't had the chance meeting in Manchester Airport?
It's a really good question. And I don't know, because although I was wanting, thinking actually I think I've made a mistake. I'm not sure your pride would sort of, will I go? And also, because they made it very easy because they approached me, and then I was on the front foot, if you like, and so I could choose what I.
I do think our careers are often these sliding door moments.
That's exactly what I refer to it. And then another key moment was in April 2018 when I was being asked to consider putting my hat in the ring to become the CEO of the UK and the sort of Northwest Europe firm, or to put my hat in the ring for global chair. And I had people, in both camps saying, we think you should go for it. And I had to stand back and look at the experience I'd had and the skill set I had, and just thought, actually, I don't think I've got all the skills that are required to be the CEO. I think I could do a reasonable job, but I could also see, another candidate who would absolutely be what people thought was the right thing. And I also thought, I've had a huge amount of time on the global board. I've just led this huge globalization project. I've got profile. And, it's clear that a lot of people on the global board were going to support me. So it became a sort of, right, if I go for this, I'm not going to get it, and that will stop me going for this. If I go for this, I've got a better chance. And also the other thing I thought, actually, it's a global platform to do some of the things that I'm very passionate about. So that was a key decision.
And Alan, you mentioned the sort of sliding doors moment there, and I think that is one way to describe it. But what you're both telling us is that actually you've grown up in a kind of an environment where personal change has been important, and you're willing to accept change for the better for your own personal lives, and then that seems to have translated into your professional lives. So when those opportunities do present yourselves, are you the sort of people who are going to jump in head first and snatch it when it comes about? Would you say?
I wouldn't say, I'm not going to give an automatic, yes, I'm going to, leap at change. I think it's hard to argue that when you've spent 38 years at the same company.
True.
but I do have the attention span of a shrew, and so I am a new experiences junkie in a way, and that manifests in my life story and my family's life story, where we've absolutely thrived on new adventures. But it's not all been professional development; it's been life development, and that's been as much of a consideration is the kind of adventure of your life. I think when you're on your deathbed, hopefully surrounded by relatives, you're not going to be reflecting on what grade you were at what age. But you will probably reflect on the ability to impact a gigantic organization, to experience, in my case, living in different places. So I wouldn't say it's not that I'm a kind of constantly looking for change, but I do love an adventure.
And when you're trying out different leadership roles within an organisation, as you mentioned earlier, Alan, do you ever worry about being compared to your predecessor in that role?
Well, imposter syndrome is not uniquely something that's accessible for women, and I felt that throughout my career, that the kind of question, am I worthy? Will I live up to the standards of my predecessor? Will I live up to my own standards, actually? And I've had periods over the years where things seem to have been just all clicking and everything's going magically. And I try at that moment in time to listen to the little devil on this shoulder saying, you're not that good. Because then there's other periods when just it seems nothing is going right, and that's what gives you permission to the little angel on this shoulder that says, don't worry, it's still the same you. So circumstances are also very important along the way.
And actually, Alan, it's as if you're reading my notes, because it's a lovely segue. Because so when Sharon was here last time, a couple of years ago, at the start,
4 years.
4 years ago now, yes, didn't it?
Pre-COVID.
Pre-COVID,
Yes.
the start of your
Just as I was coming into the role.
Sharon came in and spoke very openly in a bit of a slightly shabbier studio than this about her experiences with the imposter syndrome. And actually, Sharon, I guess it's very timely to sort of ask about reflecting on the last 4 years and whether you still feel you could live up to this job.
So it was good. Am I good enough for my job? Wasn't it? And it was an amazing discussion, because I met Poppy German, who was the CEO of the City Mental Health Alliance, and I was petrified coming in. Whereas today, I've been a bit, uptight about it, but nothing like what I was that first time. So, the developmental experiences, you continue to grow, but imposter syndrome does not leave you. And people have it at different degrees. We talked about it very openly, didn't we? You admitted you had it a bit as well.
Oh, yes.
And at times, I've had enormous imposter syndrome in this role, as I've had throughout my career. And other times, it's just wonderful and it's plain sailing, as Alan says. And the more you do these things, the easier they get, the different challenges that you're given, different opportunities that you're given. But, it's do you see it as developmental and try and turn it into a positive? And, it's very natural. That's the other thing. I mean, the great thing about talking about it, and when we did the podcast, was an enormous number of people got in touch with me and said, oh my goodness, you've just explained what I've been feeling. And to hear how you deal with it has been so reassuring. And a number of people, I had one-to-one coaching sessions and shared more about what I've been through. And it just encouraged me to talk about it more and more. And that sharing of vulnerabilities, I think, is so valuable. And we talk about creating psychological safety for our people, for them to be able to share back. And it's just, it enables people to get the support that they need and be even more effective at work and not to worry about it. And I think, one of that, so many, and you reference, I know it's not just women, but women do seem to suffer from it more. And it's more debilitating, but also, women who suffer from it tend to pull back. Men who suffer from it tend to actually push forward. And they end up sometimes with different challenges in terms of how they cope with it, because men don't have the same network to be able, or will talk about their feelings as often. Women, I think, have more outlets. So yes, it continues to be with me, but I see it as a positive, and it's to your point about, if things are going really well, you can become complacent and arrogant, and if you've always got that "am I good enough" feeling, it's good.
Did you know at Deloitte we buy goods and services from social enterprises, which contributes to our 5 Million Futures programme? From Babies with Love sells beautiful gifts for babies and gives the profits to orphaned and abandoned children around the world. Their ethically sourced designs help vulnerable children to grow up in safe, happy places. Do you know someone who is expecting? Why not treat them with a gift from FromBabiesWithLove.org? Now back to our topic of the day.
One of the things that I've discovered is, as you come up through Unilever, and it sounds very much like the same in Deloitte, you're basically responsible for increasingly large pyramids. A pyramid of one when you start, and then a small team, and then a big team. Then you maybe run a country, then maybe a region or a global division. And then someone one day pats you on the back and says, congratulations, you've reached the top of the pyramid. You're the apex predator in the organization. Well, it's absolute nonsense, because there's an invisible inverted pyramid that sits on the top of these big organizations, which has in our case, a board of directors, non-executive directors, the capital markets, the media, every customer and supplier who thinks that they have a relationship with the CEO, the NGO community, the CEO and chair community. So all of that you don't really get much exposure to typically until you find yourself in these top roles. And I think that creates the responsibility to shift your thinking on change, to change, not just changing inside the organization, but changing the system that we operate in. And that is a sort of bigger, more burdensome responsibility that I felt very conscious of. I think if you believe the premise that you can impact change from any position in an organization, and by the way, I'm sure it's true, Ethan, you said you've done work in the public sector as well. I'm sure you can surely drive change from any role in the public sector. I think the burden of the magnitude of change that you're expected to deliver rises as you take on increasingly more senior positions.
I'm also interested in, your experiences of when you've identified a change that you wanted to make, and for whatever reason it hasn't happened, or it didn't happen the way you wanted it to.
I think everybody underestimates, in particular shareholders underestimate, how difficult it is to make change in large organizations. It requires absolute unitary voice from the top of the organization on what it is the change that we're trying to make. I think more than anything, in large organizations, it requires a clearing of the decks, where none of us are very good at adequate prioritization. And prioritization is not about what you are going to do, it's about what you're acknowledging you're not going to do, so you can get on with the things that you want to get on with. Making change happen at scale is incredibly difficult. We've got one of our leaders, Nitin, who used to be our Chief Operating Officer, is now our Chief People Officer. One of Nitin's super strengths is understanding how to make change happen at scale. And I think what I've learned from him is ruthless prioritization and incredibly disciplined measurement, interestingly enough, that if you want something to change, you better be able to measure it, and otherwise it's just words.
That scale of change obviously comes with its challenges, but presumably it also comes with huge opportunity. And is that one of the reasons that you've both chosen to spend your careers in large organizations?
It's interesting because when you're in Deloitte UK, you sort of don't think this is a really large. I mean, it's a big firm. It's a very successful firm in the UK, but it's not. It doesn't feel like the Unilever. Then, obviously, you start to spend time at Global. You understand, the scale of the rest of the firm. We started in London in 1845 as sole practitioner. we are now in over 150 countries, 450,000 people, will be sort of $69 billion revenue this year. I mean, it's incredible. But a lot of people don't think about that because they're thinking about where they are. But yes, and because of the fragmentation I talked about, you sort of have less control. But now, because we have done so much to globalize, you do actually feel, yes, you can start to take the whole network with you when you are looking to do things. And we have, so critical for us to drive that consistency and all of the things that we want to do around our purpose, our climate strategy, our commitment to DE&I, and really moving the dial on women in leadership, on broader diversity in different countries, done lots of different things there. We have our world-class strategy, our commitment to empower 100 million people by 2030 through education, skills development. And as a big organisation, your opportunity to make a difference, as we've grown, it's given us more investment firepower to make a difference.
It is amazing. With absolutely no choreography, you've brought Sharon and me to exactly the same point, which is the change that I feel accountable for right now is to try to make the case of business as a force for good. The world's not in a great place. Our view is that there are three overarching emergencies. The first is the climate emergency. The second is the loss and destruction of nature. And the third is inequality in all its forms everywhere. And big business in particular, doesn't have a particularly good reputation at the moment. And I incredibly strongly believe that business can be a force for good, and that there is absolutely no trade-off between business tackling those issues of climate emergency, nature, loss of nature and inequality, and delivering strong financial returns for our owners, our shareholders, in Unilever's case. And in fact, just the opposite. The more we embrace sustainability at the heart of the company, the more I think we will deliver strong financial performance. And I'll just quickly mention why. Our brands that are seen by people, consumers, as doing something positive for society or the planet are growing much faster. We've saved 1.5 billion euros through sustainable sourcing, largely avoiding wasted energy. We have managed risk out of our system by embracing things like regenerative agriculture, by adopting water preservation practices. Most of our factories are in water scarce areas. And the fourth reason why I think sustainable business is good business is it's an absolute magnet for the best talent.
We're speaking to you when you both have just a few weeks left of your current role. How do you feel about, maybe you probably in recent weeks have started a change within your organisations, but you might not see it to fruition. So how do you feel about that?
So I feel very, very confident about, because we have, we have massive commitments. So the climate and sustainability piece, I was the first person in our global leadership team to really talk about that. We had pockets around the world where people were doing great things with clients, but we hadn't come up with a consistent strategy. We created our world climate strategy, where we're absolutely committed to getting to net zero within Deloitte and all of our operations, but very importantly helping our clients and also using our people. 450,000 people, we've educated them. They're our superpower, is what I refer to them, because they are now, we're trying to encourage them to make responsible choices and then to go back to their families and help them make responsible choices. So there's a snowball effect. So, that world climate strategy has been absolutely embraced. It's embedded. And also, because of our investments and the people that we've recruited and brought into the business, there's just huge momentum. And to Alan's point around, we will not attract the best people. They will not stay with us. But also, more and more of our clients are, it's a part of the RFP. What are you doing in these areas around DE&I, but also climate and sustainability? And now we're sort of looking at, what are we doing around biodiversity and natural capital and all of those sorts of things. So it is absolutely embedded, and the people who are coming into the leadership roles, they are all absolutely committed to it. So I'm very confident. And DE&I is something so many of us in leadership roles talk about all the time and how critical it is. So I feel very, very confident that we will continue to, do even more.
And as you come to the end of your kind of long and incredibly successful tenures in these large organizations, what do you think is the thing that you're most proud of?
So I think it's been amazing being the first female in all of these different roles that I've had, because I think you provide an example that hopefully other women can look at that and think, oh my goodness, if Sharon can do it, and Sharon with imposter syndrome can do it, then maybe I can do it as well. And to give them the courage to put their hands up. And also because I get to speak in a lot of fora about, my career, my experiences, and I speak to a lot of women, really encouraging them to sort of set their sights high and go for it. And I do a lot of personal mentoring and coaching, but I set up something around sponsorship called The Wave, which I felt very strongly about because of the opportunities I've been given. I mentioned earlier in terms of, if you get a great opportunity, it then develops you, et cetera, et cetera. And so I asked all of the members of the global executive, the global board, to sponsor at least one woman, ideally more than one, and then to go back to their teams and their countries and to cascade it like a wave, encouraging more and more of our leaders to sponsor women. And it's, sponsorship is really putting your capital on the line, your reputation, because you're saying, I think this person is really good and they can do this role. And unfortunately, in an organization where everyone at the top is the same, so in many organizations, white men in the UK, the natural networks just continue to perpetuate white males coming through. So you need to intervene, and I think sponsorship is critical. And I'm very proud of what we've been doing and the difference that we're making. Our number of women partners has increased over the last few years. We've gone from below 20% to 26% globally. And that's great, but when 43% of your people are women, there's a lot to do. So it's just, it's a constant thing that we have to keep pushing.
I really believe in this multi-stakeholder model for business, that if you look after their people and look after the community and the planet and look after your suppliers properly and look after, of course, your customers, then ultimately the shareholder will be well rewarded. And so I'm meant to have a mindset to be conscious of all those stakeholders. But in other breaking news here on this podcast, I have to confess, I feel by far the highest obligation to the people in Unilever, and a deep, deep, deep belief that if we look after the folks in the company, they'll look after all the other things, and that the reverse is not true. So the legacy of people who are still thriving in the organization, who are thriving outside the organization, and some in-betweeners who are just happy, honestly, that's what I'm proud of. That's what I'm proudest of.
Yeah. And it really speaks to our kind of question of the day around one person, but it sounds like it is the collective people that really kind of like make the difference. As you both said, that's your thing you're most proud of.
Absolutely. I do not believe that one person has, it's absolutely, if I think about our partners and our people across the organization, the impact they have every day. To your point, we talk about our purpose is to make an impact that matters for our clients, our people and our communities. And it's our people who make the impact for our clients and in our communities, and who live our values day in, day out, and build our success.
Just if we could turn back the clock and go back to your first days as CEO and global chair, is there any advice you'd give to yourself?
No.
I noticed, Sharon, that you're wearing an ring.
Yes.
And it's interesting that we're both wearing that. These senior roles are very much a marathon and not a sprint. And
exactly the same thing.
Well, there you go. That's the advice I would. You have to prioritize where you get energy from and where you recover. So a deal I did with myself prior to, I mentioned earlier, I was hesitant about accepting the role. A deal that I did with myself is that I would not compromise on playing footy on a Saturday afternoon, which I still do very badly. Taking my adventure motorcycle trips around the world every year, which the board has tried to stop me from doing every year. Not compromise on family holidays. And, I should have spent a bit more time in the gym, but these are these are jobs that are utterly draining, and you have to really manage your energy carefully. So that would be the number one piece of advice. And the second is try to avoid having a single number profit target hanging over you.
Okay. And what is the Aura Ring?
It's a biometric ring. It just measures your. I noticed you get a fitness watch. It's basically everything you get from a fitness watch, but I don't like wearing something on my wrist at night.
It's very good because it nudges you to change your behavior. So it's like by measuring your heart rate and saying it was very high for a while when you first went to bed. So you're either drinking, eating late, or exercising late. You sort of think, could have been the alcohol. So then I wasn't drinking much anyway, but I've become very conscious of not drinking. Or if I am drinking, it's sort of early so that you have plenty of water to overcome it. Not eating late is something, as a business leader, you often get these dinners and it's like, okay, I've got to work out how I manage this and not eat much late, because it does just sit in your tummy and your heart rate so your sleep quality is not as good is what it's saying, and you need good sleep. So, I was absolutely, it's not a sprint, it's a marathon. You have to really prioritize your health. And interestingly, because I throw myself into my jobs and I wasn't prioritizing my well-being. And the pandemic was dreadful in many ways. But one thing, I was on a plane every week and crisscrossing the world, very bad for climate, very bad for me. The pandemic made us all reflect, and we got technology that means you don't have to go somewhere for a 1-hour meeting, which is much, much more sensible. But the other thing it did was I got to walk my dogs every day. And I've tried to think about how do I build that properly into my diet, because I get being outside in green spaces is really important, good for you. Obviously being with dogs who are great fun. And obviously sometimes my husband's there, which is another bonus. But no, you do have to look after yourself. And the other thing is, Alan talked about ruthless prioritization. You have to really do that. And you also have to ensure that you have the right support structure, both at work and at home, but also that you have what I call a circle of trust. As you get into these roles, there's a lot of politics there can be, and you've got to think about, who are the one or two people that I can really trust without getting into an echo chamber, which is a danger, because you need people to be able to speak truth to power.
Oh yeah.
So there's all these things you're grappling with.
You started the podcast by saying that you were going to sit down with two titans of industry. And what you learned is the most important thing is walking your dog and playing footy on a Saturday afternoon. I think there's some wisdom in that.
Well, no, I think you're spot on, because if you haven't built that resilience and if you're not looking after yourselves, then who's going to be able to drive that change?
And that's one of the things I really learned, because at different points and in the pandemic, because of the different stresses, I could feel myself getting close to burnout. And I was like, I can't look after my team if I'm not looking after myself. So that's, it's like some people think, oh, looking after myself sounds really selfish. And it's like, no, it's not, because you can't do your job and you can't, what would happen if you clearly other people can step in, but people rely on you.
And so we've looked back. How about looking forward? What's next on the cards for you both?
I am going to have freedom and adventure for a little while.
Nice. Get the motorbike out.
I'm going to take a little bit of time. I've committed to one or two things, but I think it's only about 30% of my time. And I think there's a big world out there to explore. So I very much feel I'm retiring from Unilever, but I'm not very good at sitting around doing nothing. So I'm going to have a bit of fun, some freedom, some adventure, and then find a portfolio of productive things to do. I'll be involved in 2 not-for-profits. My son, by the way, the 2 boys that I mentioned earlier are fantastic kids, and I'm very proud of. And Cameron, who lives in Western Canada, is quite interested in setting up a fishing guiding business. And he's very good at fishing and very good at guiding, but has no experience in business. And so I've got this romantic notion of doing partnership with my son in business. So it'll be an array of different things. But I'm very, as you can tell, quite excited at the prospect.
Yeah, sounds great. How about you, Sharon?
I'm also very excited about the prospect of being able to wake up and not think, oh my goodness, I've got all these things I need to do, or what's coming overnight that I need to worry about.
Yeah.
So I'm having what I'm calling a sabbatical. I'm not coming back to Deloitte. I am leaving Deloitte, but I'm 9 months sabbatical, and I'm being very clear because I want to have a proper break, and I'm not committing to anything because I want to take the time to decide what I want to do. But I am planning lots of travel, lots of golf, some amazing things, seeing friends, family. And part of that will be 10 weeks in Portugal, which the dogs will come because we can drive them down there. And we'll just have a lovely time on the beach with the dogs and playing golf.
Sounds horrible. Well, Alan and Sharon, it's been absolutely fantastic listening to you today, and thank you so much for being so open and honest and sharing your experiences. I think we're sort of coming to the close of the episode, so it's only right to ask you again to summarise in a nutshell this week's big question, which is, can one person change a big business? Don't know who'd like to go first.
Absolutely, but only by surrounding yourself with the right team.
So I was going to give you a quote from Helen Keller, who said, alone we can do so little, together we can do so much.
I think it's a fantastic way to end the episode. Yeah. Thank you very much, Alan and Sharon. Thank you.
Thanks for joining us. Thanks for having us.
No, thank you. It's been great discussion and wonderful to have you, Alan. Thank you.
Thanks.
Thanks for listening to this episode of The Green Room by Deloitte. We'll be back next time with another big question. This podcast is produced by our very own Pod Squad and hosted by George Parrett, Lizzie Elston and Ethan Worth. Thanks to our creative studio for their technical support. Original music by Ali Barrett from our consulting team.